Yeah. I'm just going to stand here.
This is
right. Switching to Alex now. Alex starts.
Got that cat when you said it.
Did it go well?
Yeah, it went well.
I was concerned about it. I saw, yeah.
Once you got the instructions.
Andy Simon about an MTI going on.
Was that the MTI you're asking?
I'm not sure.
So I thought it was you guys.
The MTI is a GLS thing, isn't it?
I don't know. I just saw the MTA.
No, I just deleted all my emails.
So at 11:30, apparently there's 1 minute of silence.
Oh yeah.
Does actually anybody wants to do it?
What was the reason for it?
7 bombing from 10 years ago.
So I've got 25 minutes on this.
So do you want to do it? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay, fine. It's 11:04. There's nobody from Mario Piazza. Which doesn't surprise me too much, but
We're reviewing it, so it's fine.
there's some of them accepted. So we might just start. We got 2 talks today. First we got Alex, who is going to talk about accessibility.
Yeah, maybe we can bring that over.
Should be here.
And
Do you need this?
yes,
What's that for?
this is just to the people who are who have not joined the meeting.
We need another little height.
Is there a way to know if they're genuine?
I don't need to.
Yeah,
I don't need to be in the
I
video.
will see them
As
online.
long as
Basically.
as long as you can hear me.
That camera is like pointing to the ceiling.
No, it's not. We can move it somewhere else, but I'm not quite sure where.
It's fisheye.
Ah,
Fisheye.
Vishal.
I'm not sure that's going to work.
That's just fun.
Yeah, let's make that work.
Okay. It doesn't go that
Fountain and UX.
There we go.
I think you have to show the table a bit because you're going to drop the laptop. Table.
Yes, we can. Useless.
Come on, he's a contractor. He can buy another one.
I know.
Okay, so I begin?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, so making the web accessible. So consider those with problems and become a better developer. This presentation comes from many developers that I've worked with over the last few years, making mistakes at the expense of usability. So 25 minutes to their silence. So people have been removing CSS focus states, which are on by default, and even in big libraries they've been doing this.
Go ahead, no worries.
And setting the tab index to 0 or some other random high number. No forms where forms should be, just inputs randomly in the DOM, and no labels referring to inputs, etc. Text on conflicting backgrounds. So for example,
the color?
yeah, so like dark colours on dark backgrounds, so it's kind of very difficult to read. And controls nested inside other controls, for example, inputs nested inside A tags, which would be very difficult to navigate for assistive technologies.
Sorry, can you actually share your presentation on the Hangouts? Share your screen.
I have, yes.
So, no, you haven't. Everyone can see your
You
picture.
go to the right, to the left side, there's the share stuff.
I think it's maybe because I'm incognito.
Okay. I know you joined and left. Never mind.
What?
We had somebody from Spain who joined the meeting and
No, I'm not.
you're back.
Oh, right.
So what can you see then?
I can't see your picture. You can
See the head?
Yes, on the left, there's a, yeah.
Yeah, I've already clicked that.
No, but there's different options.
There it is.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
So which one?
That one.
Is this in the
That's really
web
sharp.
would work?
Right.
Yeah, probably this will work, yeah.
Cool, cool, cool.
Okay, I'm going to present this to everyone.
This is mostly not down to laziness. It's usually due to people kind of not knowing fully what to do and then putting that up on the web and then other people copying that or whatever, and then subsequently people thinking that's the right way to do things. So consider those who cannot use a mouse, so people with motor disabilities and can only use keyboards or assistive technologies, and consider those who have vision impairment, might need to see larger text but not too large. The blind, so think about screen readers, which I'll talk a bit about later, and the colourblind people, deaf people, and those with learning disabilities, which often kind of get not really thought about. Some of these affect the ability to read and therefore need assistance.
I guess deaf people.
I'll talk a bit about that
So
later.
you mean about like Spotify for deaf people? Or just...
Yeah,
Okay.
so moving on. So it's a misconception that accessible users are likely to have JavaScript turned off and that you should test with JavaScript disabled. 97.6% of screen reader users in January 2014 had JS enabled, and the remaining 2.4% were most likely using a text-only browser along with a graphical browser. So why should you care? So you can sleep at night. It's our responsibility as
Is
good
that full grudge?
it's our responsibility as good developers working in great companies to care. Ensuring a site is accessible improves SEO, which can then impact your business. It's actually the law. In the UK, WCAG 2.0 is the legal standard to follow. Unfortunately, it's quite dated, but it still kind of applies for a lot of things. It's a good standard to have compared to other countries, for example. There are 9.4 million disabled people in England, so we shouldn't discriminate nor miss out on that business. Disability rates rise with age. So from 1 in 20 children to 1 in 5 working age adults to 1 in 2 pensioners are classed disabled. So what can we do? The easiest single thing you can do is regularly ditch the mouse when you're testing your UI that you're developing. Can you access everything? Can you click on all the controls by pressing enter? We should use semantic HTML, using the correct tags for fit for purpose. And then going the extra mile, if we care. Does anybody here know what the Y area is? Show of hands, you know what Y area is?
Why area?
Yeah,
No.
I know you know what it is.
Yeah.
They've sent me a little bit extra for my presentation. So the Y area is a W3C standard for, it's a recommendation as of a few years ago, and it's the Web Accessibility Initiative for accessible rich internet applications. And we can use Y area to help assistive technologies, and it's really not that much extra effort. We can, for example, use an area main landmark tag to identify the main area of content. So here we have role attributes. These are actually were in HTML4, except they invalidated, unless you did some extra stuff, invalidated the HTML. So people kind of avoided them, but you know, even if they knew what they were. But in HTML5 you can use them, and it's absolutely fine. We should use the lang attribute on the HTML tag so that the correct pronunciation for screen readers is used. Sorry, am I going too quickly here?
That's alright.
Is that right? Okay. Going the extra mile and a half, what more can we do? We can install a screen reader and test by listening to a Stephen Hawking impersonator and try to navigate and see how well we do on our websites. Test with Webby or Lynx, which is easier to navigate than a screen reader, quite a lot less annoying, and closely replicates what a screen reader would speak. So on using semantic HTML, for example, we can use strong for strong importance, seriousness or urgency, EM tags for stress emphasis on words that make words the subject in discussion in the sentence, the way it's inflected or spoken. And just note that B and I are just stylistic, but have the same presentational effect, have the same default CSS styles. So when we're creating navigation, we should use the nav tag, and again with the ARIA role attribute with navigation on it. The reason for this is that older assistive technologies, for example, screen readers, the ARIA stuff was actually available before HTML5 was available, so it's just kind of ensuring. I know it seems a bit weird to have a nav and then saying that it's a navigation, because it's not doing anything else, but that's the reason why it's a legacy thing. So on to links, buttons, and buttons that look like links. Creating single-page applications these days, there's kind of some ambiguity with what kind of tags to use for what specific roles. And all I can say on that is just don't use a span or a div for something that's clickable. We should embrace the events and default functionality that comes for free with the browser by convention, if no other reason, so that we're all kind of working on the same page. And then progressive enhancement, and then assisting the assistive technologies next. So for example, here we've got a button, note to override the default, and a link saying follow me, which isn't actually best practice, but I'm just kind of showing that the blank href should be used so that the link receives focus, because without href, it automatically won't get focus. So that's the slide on SPAs really, on single page applications. So when we're creating forms, put form controls inside the form tag, as I said earlier, and have an action and a method attribute on that form tag, and bind to the submit event on that form, not to the button, which I've seen in the past people do. And that's what you would do with JavaScript, for example. Does anybody here know what the default type attribute on a button is in all browsers? Anybody?
Sorry.
What's the default type attribute? What's the default value for a type for the button tag?
It's not so.
Is it submit? Anybody know? Let's submit. Yeah. So I kind of gave you the answer on the previous slide. So here I'm saying overriding the default, which I've selected button there, so that it's not actually submitting the form, it's doing some other action, like making something slide out from the side or whatever. So when you're adding label tags, use the for attribute. The value should match the ID of the form control, and the placeholder should not be used instead of a label tag. It should be used as a kind of cue of what to put in that field. What's the time?
18 minutes past 11.
Oh, you're like Siri.
Yeah. We don't like compute too long, right? So Owen.
And on form controls, make sure you give them a name and a value. And note that if you are working with sensitive data, that you should really not actually use a name attribute, just in case it submits with the form by accident. So here's just a simple example of a form with a field set and a bunch of fields using the legend. Legend used to be bad practice actually for accessibility because it would actually get read out for every single label, and it was classed as a nuisance factor for the screen readers, but the technology's come a little bit more further on these days. Hopefully it won't affect too many people on the screen readers. And we can use nested field sets as well, for example, for checkboxes and radios. And here you can see I've used the for attribute matching the IDs. So tables, accessible complex tables can actually get quite complex. However, 99% of tables are quite simple and therefore simple to build and easy to access. Just make sure that you use TH tags to represent your headers. You don't actually need to use the T heads or the T bodies, T foots. You can, but the browser kind of, as you've seen in the Chrome DevTools, actually adds them in by default. Now onto headings. So I use H1 to 6 alongside HTML5 intended outlining, despite no known implementations in graphical browsers or assistive technologies. So who here knows what the outlining algorithm is in HTML5, or the sectioning algorithm? Has people, the show of hands has come across that? Okay. So the H1 to 6 tags define the hierarchy, not the font size, so don't skip around the levels willy-nilly. And basically, there are 4 sectioning tags in HTML5. You've got the article, the nav, section, and aside. And the body is also one, but it's obviously your root one. And then every time you add a new one inside there, you can actually use an H1 again as a kind of reset. It's not necessarily the best practice to do that, but that's kind of how it's intended to be used. There's a good
question, how does it going to work with SEO?
That's why I'm saying that you shouldn't really use the sectioning algorithm as it was originally intended, as in putting a reset H1 here. It's fine to have H1, multiple H1s on the page. That's not going to affect SEO in a bad way at all.
As long as they're in different sections.
Even the sectioning algorithm isn't really implemented in SEO. It's not implemented at all in anything yet. And we don't know actually if it will. It's kind of Ian Hickson's idea of how it should be. And yeah, I recommend using sectioning, but actually having the H1 to 6 as you would have intended originally. Because actually, if I was to do an H2 here and an H3, this would actually be classed as the H2, it would take that as the H1 essentially. But then to older technologies, that's still in the H2. It's quite difficult to explain, but that's kind of how it is. There's a really good article on what's it called?
Stack Overflow?
Nothing serious there.
Smashing Magazine. Now onto font sizes. So text sizes should always be relative to the base font. For example, rems falling back to EMs or percentages. And using pixel sizes is pretty bad for IE 9 and less. And also when building a responsive site, it's a lot better for maintenance to actually do this using rems with the fallback to more relative font sizes. And ensure that text is still readable and shows correctly when shown at 200% standard size. I.e., don't make your text too big because it can actually hinder people who kind of look at things really, really close and can't make out what it says at all. Onto images. So make sure you're always using an alt attribute, as I'm sure you all know, even if it's blank for beautification. You can have a blank alt tag. Generally, you'd use that as a background image, but if you needed to for some reason, for some parallax thing you're doing or whatever, I don't know, then just make sure it's blank. And the alt attribute should be, for example, the company name, not just logo. Just imagine you're blind, you want to know what's on that image, you know? You want to know what it represents. And contextual links around the subject. So for example, to download the W3C's editor browser, I might click here. You'll see click here a lot, and it's really bad practice. So just try and make sure that the context is around the actual text of where the link is going to. So here it should be Amaya's website.
And that's really important for SEO as well.
And it's
Because
really,
that
yeah,
Amaya website will get a bonus for that link.
correct. Yes, good point. On to video and audio. So we should include closed captions for the deaf, hard of hearing. So yes, Spotify for the deaf. If there is a video in Spotify. And you can actually use my closed caption builder, which I created from scratch, which is on GitHub. And audio descriptions for the blind, just for video, of course.
Has anyone ever heard the audio descriptions? They actually describe what's going on in the scene, not what people say.
So it's like Jerry's walking through the door and stuff like that. It kind of interrupts almost what they're saying sometimes. But yeah, it's quite interesting. We should consider colourblind people. So if you don't know what sensible colours are to design with or use, for your sites, then use an online checker. And just think text on coloured or image backgrounds. Is it really going to be legible? It's legible to you because you kind of know maybe the context of the site or whatever. But it's a minute silence now, isn't it?
5 minutes, 7 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. I should be able to get through.
And
So-
a few questions.
Think colour not being the only representation for the meaning of it as well. So for example, red and green, you could actually have something representing that in another way, for example, bold or unbold. And considering using a simulator, which this guy has created. So some resources, some stuff on BBC. It's a good accessibility checklist, just to check off that you've got all the points there. And also remember that good design can and does go hand in hand with usability and accessibility. It helps a lot. Especially when handing over to a developer who's got to code it up and might think that he's got to just code it blind and match it exactly without kind of raising any points. So on to people with learning difficulties. So from the Web Credible site, your website should behave consistently. For example, all links and buttons should look and behave in the same way. Avoid using words in their non-literal sense. So example, it's raining cats and dogs. Avoid using abstractions. Provide a link to a telephone number rather than just contact us. Practice what you preach. Web Credible, because they have it. And provide clearly signposted, simplified summaries of pages, content at the top of the page. And on a few more, break information into small, simple chunks and illustrate them visually wherever possible. Always provide an obvious way to get back to simpler content so that they're not kind of immersed into walls of text like the last two slides. And increase the spacing between lines and text and paragraphs. And increase the distance between the text and the underlining links. For example, using border bottom just to kind of make it a bit more interesting. And increase the target area of navigation links. Any questions?
Madrid, yes sir? Anything you want to ask? Can you hear us first? That's something I wanted to check at this time. Okay, cool. Hey. Hello. Do you have any questions?
Hola.
Do you have anything you want to ask Alex?
Got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Good. In fact, we will try to see some of your resources like web page.
And can you share also the slide with us? Can
Yeah.
you send us the link with for the
I'll be
slide?
sharing that afterwards, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So in London at 11:30, we got a 1 minute silence.
In 1 minute's time.
So we're going to have a tiny break, and then we're going to move on to the next presentation.
Yes, this meeting was more about the user experience than front end. Don't you think so?
Sorry, I don't really understand the question.
I was saying that the meeting was much more about the user experience. So probably you have to share this info, good info also with the user experience team. Because some concepts are about how to architect.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Page.
I agree. We actually got 2 UX people in a row here in London.
Yeah.
But
Because,
we're also recording the video, so we can share that with you guys. We're gonna have the minute silence now, okay?
Oh yeah.
yeah, because about colors and so on is much more how you
Sorry guys, we need to stop at 1 minute.
It's a minute silence in remembrance.
Are you there? We can't hear you.
I think that's it. Minute.
Yeah, that's a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for that. Can you move to our presentation? Shall we with you?
You didn't get it. You didn't get the minute silence. Yeah. Waiting for a response.
Just perfectly a minute then.
Maybe we should explain them why.
Exactly.
Minute of
We were just having a minute silence.
Well, they sent email in the morning.
Random like minute silences.
So just, we had an email this morning just asking us to stop 1 minute today. There was, how do you call that?
Bombing.
A bombing last year on 7th of July.
10 years ago.
10 years ago. I don't know what, I wasn't here, so there was in remembrance of that event.
But you definitely heard about it.
No, I haven't, I think. I
You haven't heard about London bombings?
No, it's multiple women's.
What was it, Australia?
Well,
10 years ago on the tube and the buses.
They set up a bomb in King's Cross and a few other places.
Yeah, some buses.
Yeah.
One of the most.
I think everything knows. I was too busy there.
I didn't hear about it. I was in Prague. Let's go.
I think all the again.
Everything's going bad at home.
If you ask someone if you heard about 9/11, you can get around it.
But I said I might get past.
Especially in New York.
Yeah,
Well, you had Spanish bombings as well, didn't you? On the trains in Spain. No, was it? No, that was Tunisia. No. But in Spain had it on trains again.
Which one is it?
When it happened, you could
Be on your-
they stopped all publishing.
We're in Spain.
In another.
Oh, I remember that. There was like
Yeah, I think that's good. Cool. Alright. So moving to the next talk. In the past few months, Ricardo and I have been playing a bit with React, kind of accelerated a bit lately. We believe it's a really cool framework. I think it's kind of next step a bit for us. We wanted to share a bit what we discovered, what we learned. So we kind of split this talk in two parts. I'm going to go a bit about generalities, how it works, why it's good actually. And then later on, Ricardo will just do a bit of live coding just to show, hey, this is how you actually build an application from scratch. So, React. It's a framework which has been developed by Facebook, which is now open source. They keep on maintaining it. It's gaining a lot of momentum. There's a lot of commits happening on the code base. And they define it as a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And at the first glance, it can look like, yeah, well, it's yet another JavaScript framework because, you know, we've got Backbone, we've got Angular, JavaScript MVC, Ember. There's a very long list of those. There's a couple of key differences with React. The first one is actually not an MV star framework. This is kind of the usual way MVC frameworks are built. You kind of split your concerns into different boxes, and you call each of the boxes a class. So this is kind of probably the most abstract way of looking at it, with model, controller, view model, view. Backbone probably kind of model and view model are kind of the same thing in a way. This separation of concern doesn't completely work because often you just end up, hey, I need to change this somewhere in the application. And you end up modifying several of those classes just to get to that result. So there's a bit of coupling happening. What React does, it actually builds components, like blocks of code. And it basically like self-contained, very modular, very dynamic representation of the HTML. And one of the ideas also there is that you're not going to try necessarily to split the presentation logic and the presentation and the logic. Everything can actually end up in the same place. So this is the most the most abstract way of creating a component. It's not very pretty. You basically say, hey, I want to create an align with some text in it, second align with some text in it, a URL, the class name, put the two allies in there, and then I render everything. It kind of mirrors very closely how you do things in the DOM. But if you have to do that on every single project, you're going to hate it. So people came up with an alternative called JSX. It's a bit like HTML, but it's actually JavaScript. You basically declare your template inside your JavaScript, and it just rendered. And this is much easier to actually visualize, to understand, than what we had here, where we just had to do everything using functions. The small drawback here is that to actually render that in a browser, you're going to need to pre-process the data. You got kind of two ways of doing that. Either you do that, you actually build the code, and you kind of export it to like ES5, which is fine. Or you just, some browsers like Chrome allow you to actually do it on the fly, directly in the browser. So they've done that. One really cool thing about React is that you can compose your application using different blocks. So here I created what's called a composite object, what I call a composite object. Inside there's a list, there's a title, and that's it. And you just replicate that structure several times. You put like blocks, blocks, and you end up building your application using a block of HTML components. This actually goes a step further. The way the Facebook people recommend building applications is to start from a UX design, look at the boxes which have been created by UX people, and you actually end up very often having something you can actually just migrate directly into React, because it's actually the same approach of just compartmentalizing everything, making a component of every single bit. So that was one side of why React is good. The second side is about actual performance when rendering your application. Normally, when you build an app, you're going to try to avoid a number of things. You're going to avoid trying to work too much in the DOM because it slows, because it implies reflows and things like that. And it basically makes you ask yourself, as a developer, should I really be the one trying to do the small, tiny optimization? Or is there a way to actually delegate that to something else? And React basically kind of solved the problem by saying, we're going to re-render everything all the time. At first glance, it's actually crazy, because it looks like it's going to be a lot of operations, and it's going to bring your browser to your knees. But actually what's happening here is that they use something called the virtual DOM. So when something changes in the application, you're going to grab every component and look at its actual state. And you're going to compare that to the state on the previous iteration. And you're only going to keep the difference. And at the end, you're going to apply that as a rollback. It turns out that it's actually a very clean, very simple approach to that for that problem. It's fast. I've seen like really huge tables, like with tens of thousands of lines, and it just re-renders very nicely. The last point here, it's because of where I did it. So you can use React to do backend rendering. It's a good benefit because it is faster to run in the backend. Just send everything to the client ready to be displayed. That's the first thing. It's also very good for SEO because Google just sees your page and can index it properly. So there's a couple more technical points we need to discuss. There's the data flows and stat props. I'm going to give the lead to Ricardo on that, and I'm going to try to implement a quick showcase application. Morning.
Sorry, you say you can use it on the back end?
You can, yes.
Should I come over?
Yeah.
It's kind of like on the problems back in front. Well,
You alright?
No.
You'll be alright. Yeah.
So we have a special engine which will come into
So, what I'm going to do is to...
You're not presenting it. Oh, are you? Yes, you are.
Right.
Good, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to create a small application of React just to see how React is working and what we can do with React. We're also going to highlight a bit the problem of working only with React.js without any other framework or library like Flux. So this first presentation will be only about React.js and nothing else. The next one will be addressing the problem with React, with Flux and other libraries. So the application that...
You're not doing Flux today?
No, I'm not doing Flux. So the application that we're trying to build today is a very small application here. By building this application, we're going to show how to change the UI, how to build different components, and how to propagate events through the application, and see why working only with React.js is a bit of a problem, and we need something else. So, can I mirror the screen? Because I'm not seeing anything here. I'm only seeing you.
You could rotate yourself and look at the screen instead of us. That would work.
You should be able to see both at the same time.
Yeah.
If you share the entire screen rather than just that slide, then you can look at what you're presenting.
Oh, Star Trek.
That's fine. Now we're into your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, the browser.
To present another one.
Yep. You crushed. Striking.
You said it wasn't very expensive.
Yes. Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah, how does it?
Max wants me to do it.
Can I share the same screen when I have
React is pretty
okay. Look.
Max.
And React.
Yeah. They would change
No,
stuff.
work, do it. Put back Windows.
Yeah, but she doesn't show.
Yeah, but that's goes there. That's different. That's not screen sharing.
Yeah, good. That's okay, so I can look through it, that's fine. Good. Do you see, do you see the code?
But they can't.
No, but I'm streaming that, right?
It's a really beautiful mouse. What's the problem?
Mountain of code.
Okay.
Right. Let's do
You
that.
can do it. Sorry, guys.
Right, so this is the application that we're going to create, and we're going to start from scratch now.
10 minutes.
What?
A minute silent.
So, first of all, the thing that we need to work with React is the actual React library and the JSX transformer. We're going to see what the JSX transformer is. Okay, so this is our application. It's an empty application. So,
Excuse me, are you sharing the code only on your screen? We have
You see the console
the terminal.
or no, this.
oh, you don't see anything.
Can you not share the entire screen?
Oh, because you can, definitely.
Yeah, change it so that it's mirrored rather than having multiple screens. Just go into your settings, your system preferences.
Is it not in the Hangouts.
Yeah, the Hangouts is too
Hangouts,
moving, right?
No, you need
Positions.
you need to make it one screen first, and then share the entire screen.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Right. Now you
Yeah.
see the code, right?
I can't see you.
Hmm?
You can just see it first.
Nothing right now.
You need to go to
No more.
share entire screen. That's it. And again. Entire screen. There you go.
Go to the tab before you try.
Now you
That's better.
Yes.
Technology.
Good. So we're gonna build the application step by step in 15 minutes. 15. So just to start off, to work with React, I was saying, you need the React library plus the JSX transformer. This is not actually needed every time because you can transform the JSX on the server. In a big process.
I'm sorry, in Madrid, we cannot see the code.
It should be on
We see
record.
the directory.
Is it showing to you?
Yeah. You should be able to see it in the front end tribe in Ricardo's window in the. There should.
Is it better?
Okay, now we can see it.
Good. So again, you need the React library, you need the JSX transformer, and then your application. So if you haven't seen that before, this is the application that we want to create. It just filters a list of names and shows you the number of items found. This is it. It's very simple. Now, this is our file, and React is all about components, as you know. So it's about composing different components together to create an application. So I already created the component, just the names. So we're going to have a count bar that will be this bit here. And then we're going to have an item list that will show the items, a filtered input that will filter the items, and the React application will be the controller for the whole application. So let's start with the item list, just to see how we create a component. So whenever you create a component, you need to call the React create class. And the only method that you have to implement is the render method. This is the only method that you have to implement. Now in React, you can use the JSX syntax, which is a markup-like syntax, XML-like syntax. So this means that from the render method, you actually return kind of a markup. So for example, from here we can return something like
So you're building this with Grunt or something?
hello. So now because I added the JSX transformer in the browser, so the browser will actually build it for me.
Okay.
Does that not need to be a string?
Hmm?
No.
Clever.
That's JSX.
That's JSX. It's not HTML. It is JSX, which is different.
Ish.
It looks like HTML, but then before going to the browser, or in the browser in this case, it's gonna be transformed into JavaScript. So this file will actually be JavaScript. So this is our component. We created a component with a render method, and we're returning something from the render method, which is just a div. To render this component in the page, we need to call the React render method. And the React render method wants to know the component that you want to render, which in this case is the item list. And then you want to know where you want to render the component. And we want to render the component here in this div.
How do you access the square bracket?
We might do what?
In the Italian keyboard. I can't use the Italian keyboard anymore. Let's give it a class, it'll be easy. There you go.
Just be a dot.
Dot, yeah.
Just use dot.
Just, yes. So, we want to render this component, and we want to render the component here in this selector. Here you can use wherever you want, even jQuery, but you actually don't use jQuery with React because it doesn't make sense. It has everything built in like a DOM library, so you don't need it. So,
Hello, yeah, we have it.
There you go. So this is our component. So if we review what we've done, it's just a render method that returns some markup, and then we render the application. This method here should be called as an entry point for the application. So we should always render a main component from here, and then that main component will include our other components, will compose the UI. So this is the idea. Now, since this is called item list, it's probably good if you render a list. So we have a list of items here, and we're going to see how to render a list in React. So first of all, I'm going to change this to a UL. Then, what you want to do is, we have these elements. Okay, this is global at the moment. It shouldn't be global. It should come from a server or somewhere else. But to keep it simple, we're going to use elements as a global object, so we can access from everywhere. So what we're going to do is we want to render elements.all, so all the elements in this object. So what we usually do in React to do this, I usually create another method that renders the list and returns the markup for the list. And to do this, we map through the elements. So when we go over the elements through the map, we will get a single item every time.
Just return it.
And what I want to do is to return. So this will give me the name, like apples, broccoli, chicken, and blah blah. What I'm going to do is to create an li out of this with the name of the item inside. And the way you add variables into this XML syntax is to use curly braces, which I'm going to copy from here, because I have no idea how to use curly braces.
There's some further down in the file.
So this is the item. So what we're going to return now, done. Okay, this is just because the ID doesn't like the li inside of a JavaScript file. So we have a render list, and we map through the elements, and for every element we return an li. No, we don't need this. And then inside here, inside our UL, we're gonna invoke this function. So you can mix JavaScript and markup like syntax in JSX, and then this eventually will be all JavaScript.
Just a question, why have you put the return with the JSX style stuff in brackets, but you haven't just there?
Here?
Yeah, does that need to be in brackets there?
No, not really.
I think it's
I don't need them.
multiple lines, yeah?
Sorry?
So it's just
It's for multiple lines.
for visual.
It is for multiple lines.
Okay.
Here, for visual, you don't actually need them.
Here you
You
can
always
upload
need
it.
to return one element, basically. That's the only rule you can
Yeah.
do. I tried to return several items once and just like, no.
So from here, we actually return an array, right? And the array goes here. This will be an array of li elements, and hopefully that will run to here. There you go. So this is the list of items. Next of me.
Yes.
Well, as long as we're not kicked out of the room, we can go on, I think. But
Okay.
If anybody got something to do, that's fine.
Okay, so this is a list. But the thing is, we are rendering the list from here, but we are accessing something which is global, which is elements, and we shouldn't be doing this because this component is not actually reusable as long as we're using something that is in this file and only in this file. It won't be in another file. We should be able to grab this component, copy this in another file, well, share it as a module in another file, and it will just work rendering the list. So this is another way of doing it. And so the first question is, how do we send properties into a component? We send properties to a component using the props. And being this kind of an HTML tag, we can keep the property name and just pass wherever we want. In this case is elements, which is this variable here. So I'm rendering an item list passing a property element items, which is actually a JavaScript variable, a JavaScript object. So when I go into
we need to vote here, like, we have no more time in this room for this meeting. There is another meeting in this.
Okay, we're videoing the presentations, so you'll be able to see them afterwards at the end of it.
So we are apologizing, but we need to vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So good. So how do we access the property now? So within the component, there's a property named props, and then you have the item. Props is an object, so you can access all the items, all the properties inside the props object. And in this case is items. So if I refresh the page now, they should still work. There. So we're not accessing the elements anymore, and this component is a bit more reusable. Although it's not really reusable because we know the implementation of items. We know there's something inside items. So it's not really generic, but it's kind of generic. But we're going to make it generic in a while. Then we have another bit, which is the count bar, that will show us all the elements returned in the search. So we're going to implement the count bar as well, so we see how to compose components together. So again, we have to implement the random method and return something from the random method. And I'm going to return just the div. Okay, so this is the count bar, and now we had to render the count bar and the item list as two components together. How do we do this? And so when we start to have more than one component, it is good to have a controller component that renders them all and creates the sort of UI by composing components. So the controller doesn't have anything different from normal component. It's just another component that renders something. So in this one, I want to render the item list, and I want to render the item list, and then I want to render the count bar. So two components, and then now from our entry point, we're going to render our React application. So we're passing items into the React application. So the React application will get the item as properties. If I want to pass properties down to other components, I need to use these .props, .items in this case, which is this thing here. So again, everything should hopefully work.
I'm just wondering how the
error.
bar would know where to render itself if you didn't specify the element.
No, so the problem is that I forgot to wrap everything in a div. So whenever you have more than one component, you cannot just return a bunch of components. You have to return a container with something inside. So you need to do it.
That's the same as Angular.
Now it will work. Okay, good. The only problem is that the count bar should be here. Good. So we already have two components and an application component that renders them all. Now what we want to do is to create another component, the filtered input, that will have an input and will filter all the lists, given what you type into the component, into the input field.
We have to leave. Thank you for your time. See you later.
See you. Bye.
We are leaving. Bye bye.
Bye.
Good. So, filtered input again. This will have an input and the filtered list. So again, the only thing that we have to implement is the render method, and from here we can return an item list. For now, I'm just rendering the whole item list plus an input field. The input is the same input. This is not, well, the syntax is the same, input type text and blah blah blah, but it's actually implemented within React as every other component. Okay, and from our main application, I'm going to now render the filtered input instead of the item list, and I'm going to render the item list from the filter input. So you see, in React, there's a lot about passing things around and composing different components together. So hopefully this will still work.
Error.
Oh, there you go. Always the same, right?
Voilà.
He's just testing us.
This is guys, wake up. Good. So we have an input field, we have the list, and we have this other component. So having an input field, now we can see how we bind events to input. And what you're going to see now is something you won't like. So,
the old style.
Since you've been a developer, everyone told you that you shouldn't use the onChange. But this is kind of different with React because, again, those will be turned into JavaScript. I keep copying colibris because I don't know how to type that. So everything will be within the component. So it's not scattered into different files. It will always be here. So what we want to do is, at every change, I'm going to change the filter list. Okay, and this will be a function that you have to implement. Filter list will be a function. It will take an event as every handler. So if we console log the event, you will see that this will be a synthetic event. So it's not DOM event that you always get into the browser because the virtual DOM and the DOM that is implemented in React is different. It's implemented by React, so even the events are different. And there's no I think there's no bubbling in the event, so they don't bubble up. So whenever I type here, I should see something that I'm not seeing anymore.
Yeah, I
It
can
was
see
there,
it.
you got.
So this is a synthetic event. But this event has a target.
Which is
I don't know why it's not. So if I target the value, now we should see something a bit more interesting.
Whoa, such a nice shape.
So, so this is how you bind events and event handler. So if you look at the component, the nice thing is that if you look at the render method, you see how the component is composed. And if you look at every property event, you can see how the component reacts to those events, which is good and which is nice. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you some method, some life cycle method, because the component is rendered into the is mounted into the DOM with this method here. The render method here mounts this component in this mount point. That's how they call it. So around this mount, render, and get properties, get state, there are all sorts of method where you can do something during the life cycle of the component. So we talked about properties for now, but React also has state, and the properties are something that are coming from the outside into the component, like data information. The state is internal, as inside the component, and stays inside the component. Like if you build in a drop down, and if you want a drop down to stay open across the render, then you can set an isOpen variable into this internal state, and as long as that's true, you can react into the render method and do something. You can change the internal state of the component by calling setState. Every time you call the setState, the component will completely re-render. And every time a component completely renders itself, it will always re-render all the child. And then the reconciliation algorithm will diff all the differences and will understand if this item list, for example, changed. If it's not, it doesn't re-render. So you can create an initial state for the component using the getInitialState function. And from this function here, you have to return an object that represents. You you had to return an object that represents the initial state of the component. So, since I want to unify the way we use items, what I'm going to do here is to create an items object, and at the beginning, when the filtered input starts, I want to render all the items in the list because there's no filtering. So I'm going to render all the items. And here, instead of the properties, I'm going to use the state. So it's exactly the same. This is the state and this is the properties. Then I had to go here in the item list and remove all from the items. And now it is generic, because if you pass items as an array, you will render that array. So this is now generic, as we wanted it to be. So get initial state returns all the elements here as a list. You will go into the item list. You will call render list. You will go here. We'll create an array of items. We will put them here in the UL, and we should still see a list. Yes. So we have a list, and we have a handler on the onChange for the input for the input. So what we want to do now is to try and filter the list. So the way we can filter the list is very easy. Since it's an array, we can use the filter property in the array. So I have this.props.items.all, which is the array. I can use the filter, and the filter will give me one item at a time. What I want to do is, whenever a word is inside the name, I will return the word. So I will include that name in the filter. So I just need to return that item. That's lowercase. So this to lowercase as well. So just from -1. So it's actually inside the word. Let's try and console log this. So it is now filtering. So what I want to do is to assign the result of the filter into this filtered array here. I'm passing this is an element, and I'm passing around the elements. The elements is always passed by reference. So if I change these.props, I'm actually changing elements.filter. I mean elements.whatever. So in the filter list here, I'm gonna assign this.properties.item.filter. This is just assigning. I'm not doing anything. Now, if I want to render this component with a shorter list of items, I need to set the state of this component. That's why I'm using getInitialState, because the name in the render method will always be this.state.items, but I changed this.state.item from being the full list to being the small list. And the way we do this is set state, and I need to, okay, no. And the items will now be the filtered ones and not the complete list. So I did this, I filtered the array, I set the state again, this component will re-render, and nothing will happen in this component, but the item list will get a new array of items, which is now the shorter array, and it will re-render with a shorter list.
No, we won't.
Not now. Oh, yeah. Good.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry at all about updating the DOM.
You don't have to.
That's really
Yeah.
good.
And the nice thing is that looking at the filtered input component, you know exactly what's going on. You know that we have an item list, which in a perfect world you're gonna require this item list with CommonJS. So this small thing here will be in its own modules. In its own module, it will be shareable between other components. Can be composed with anything else as long as you pass just an array of elements. So this is now generic. Okay, so the filtering stuff is done. What we can do now is to implement the count bar to reflect the fact that we're not having 8 elements all the time, or we're having 8, 4, 3, wherever as we type. So the way we can do this is, first of all, we start passing as a property. We start passing the items to the count bar, and in the count bar, instead of saying X, we're gonna say I can't create an application, I cannot actually type copy this. So there is props items. I'm still passing it as items, and all. Let's start with this .length. So this will be whatever number instead of X. Okay, so 8 elements return, but it will stay always as 8. So, and this is probably the most difficult thing in React. Passing, well, if you use only React, without Flux and anything, without any structure, then it's a bit hard to pass events around, because as you can see, there's no event bus. React doesn't give you an event bus. React doesn't give you a promise engine. It doesn't give you anything. It's just the V. So you have to invent the wheel every time, not with Flux. So what we can do, we can ask the filter input to tell us that there was a change. And the way we do this, we can pass another property to the filter input, and this property will be notify change. This is a function that I have to implement now. So since I have no event bus, what I'm going to do is to create a basic event. This is JavaScript native. So I'm not going to pass any value because we don't care. And then I'm going to dispatch. So just as a side note, don't do this. Like, no. But this is always the problem of React and other React. We have nothing to work with apart from the render and the life cycle method for the UI. So also we shouldn't access the document from here, because the component should be self-contained, and even if the document is everywhere, it's not on the server. And if you render this on the server, this will be a problem. So I'm dispatching an event every time. Well, I'm not doing anything at the moment. I'm passing the onChange property to the filter input. So when I go in the filter input, the idea is every time I filter the list, I want to trigger this event. So in this moment, I've already filtered the list. If I access the properties, I will have my onChange, and I can just call it because it's a function. And this will do whatever. In this case, we'll trigger an event. And the idea is now that the count bar will subscribe to that event and will set an internal state so that it will be rendering another number. How do we do this? There's no initialize method in React, but there's another method that is called component did mount. So again, whenever you render a component, you're mounting a component into a mount point. So the component did mount means this component was now rendered. And this is kind of initialized. Component will mount is another method that will be called before rendering the component.
Like before and after rendering mount.
Yes, it's like that. So the component will mount will be called on the server and on the client. Component did mount, since you can only render on the client, will be called only on the client. Both will do for us at the moment. So I will use component did mount. And here I have to subscribe to the event, change.
So what would you use on the server, sorry?
With Flux, there is an event bus.
Oh, yes.
But actually, what I just said was bullshit, because document is actually implemented inside React. Right. So document at event listener is not the DOM one, is the React.
So they abstracted?
Yes, completely, so forget about this.
But you still shouldn't use that because that's really fast. You just follow the demo today just because it's much faster.
Yes, because I don't want to build an event bus now.
Why don't you build one now quickly?
It's fine.
It's only at 25 minutes of the time, you know. So.
Well, we're all happy.
You want lunch today?
Yes.
Okay, so that's good.
8 plus folds as well. Okay. I don't even know what that is. So, this onChange would be enough. So whenever this event happens, please call the onChange. And on the onChange, for now, we just console log something so that we should have become we're calling it. Okay, good. So the event is working. So we're using the same pattern again on the count bar. Instead of rendering the props, I want to render the state. So I want to unify the all and the filtered array into one item, which is the item's name. And to do this, I'll use the initial state. And again, at the beginning, when this run for the first time, get initial state will be called the first time the component renders, and only the first time. So the first time, I want to return an object, which is the items object, and in the items object, I have props.items.org. Okay?
Can you silence your keyboard?
It's not the keyboard, it's the hands. Okay, so let's go to the So 8 still shown, but now is in the state and is not from the props. What I can do now, in the onChange, I can set the state again. To be items. but the filtered one. So it will go here as items, and I will read the length, and it should be now 2, 1, 3. Okay, so we implemented kind of a communication bus. There's another way of doing this. Since every time you re-render a component, you render all the shell components, what you can do is, in the main application, which is then the way you do it when you use Flux. In the main controller application, instead of triggering an event, in the onChange you just set the internal state of the React application, and all of this component will re-render, so you don't have to pass things around. It's much easier. But I wanted to show you one of the limits of React when you use only React. Last thing, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And this is because class is a reserved name in JavaScript. But if you want, when you want to style your component, you have to use class name. And since we have Bootstrap here, then if I add this class, we should give it some margin.
So is that a common practice to put your DOM stuff in the JSX?
Yes.
That's supposed to be.
Did you break it?
Oh,
That's impossible.
I know how is it styled. Display none.
Now, see? Well, we need it. Bootstrap is not here. Fine. So, this is it actually. We have the whole application. There is already a repository with this other file, which is actually, I think, the same.
We might migrate that stuff to the public element GitLab Git account rather than the private one, because only one side of the company can access it.
Yeah, this is still waiting for Bootstrap. So anyway, yeah, I think this is all application.
Questions?
Questions?
That was quite technical, so I invite you to go and play with React. I think it's a really cool tool.
It's a really good video on Docs Plus about React as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that I've seen a few React conferences, videos as well, and they're really, really good quality because Facebook puts a lot of money into it. It's
Facebook using it across their site.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's the whole site.
Yeah.
Because Facebook is bloody fast when they're
So, yeah, I invite you to play a bit with it. Have a go.
So one more interesting thing is we had like a meetup a few months ago here, and there were actually guys who connected Backbone with React.
Yeah.
So they used Backbone as a structuring thing, like the architectural thing. So they had like controllers, models from Backbone, and they were using React components as views. So they updated.
So the whole thing about React, you can just put it into any framework.
They had to do a lot of hackery around it though.
Yeah.
They did it, but not much, a little bit.
They were not really proud of what they had to do to make it work.
And they said if you can avoid it, like if you can start from scratch with React and all the React project.
It's just easy into their project.
So the next talk will be about actually how to put a bit of more architecture around it. So we will be talking about Flux.
When's Flux?
Soonish, or next 2 weeks, I reckon.
Not next week.
Not next week is well, we could do it from Madrid.
Oh yeah? Do it from Madrid.
Right, because the week after those guys are not here. So yeah, it's just...
Who's not here?
You? No, not you, but there's 5 people in your team in Madrid.
Next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the week after.
No, the week after is when we go to.
I'm in Madrid the week after.
Well, just going to mention them.
Alright, thank you guys.
Right.
We're in Madrid on the 21st.
I get smashed.
Okay.